this afternoon, I'm at the supermercado near my house and I'm getting chorizo. We buy beef in big containers. They're like a quarter or an eighth of a cow or something, depending, and put it in the deep freeze and thaw it out. But I have a chorizo habit, and I go to the supermercado and get chorizo once in a while. And I go up to the market, the meat market, and ask for chorizo. And my normal meat guy is not behind the counter, and it's a woman filling in. And I ask for 1 pound, and she gets me this much and puts it on the scale, and it's 1.5 pounds. And she starts to gather it back up so that I am at 1 pound. And I'm just like super casual because it's chorizo and I can eat more than 1 pound. I just am trying to make good choices. I'm like, oh no, that's fine, that's great. And she measures it out and charges me for 1.5 pounds, and I leave with 1.5 pounds of my pork chorizo. And I realized as that was happening, after it happened, that March 29th is the day that in 1943 meat rationing started. Right? Meat rationing was meat and cheese, was the last round of rationing that happened in the United States, as I understand it. So first they started with sugar, coffee, and shoes. And everybody got these little booklets. The booklets had stamps in them, and for you had one stamp and you could buy 1 pound of coffee every 4 weeks with the stamp in the beginning. Now keep in mind, this is not that you take in your stamp and you get your pound of coffee, right? This is not EBT, this is not WIC, this is permission to buy it. It is permission to get that food, right? This is in the United States. This is when my grandparents were very young. This was permission to buy it with your money, right? That's really important, I think. This is not exchanging for. This is permission in this system to purchase this amount of food. You were allowed to purchase up to 1 pound of coffee every 4 weeks. So the first book is sugar and coffee and shoes. The second book has 2 parts. The first part is for processed food, and that's like canned goods, canned vegetables and stuff like that, dried fruit, anything that goes along that line. And then the third part that hit today in 1943 was the meat and cheese. And the way they did meat was a point system where you were allowed so many points for the week. And you could get a steak if you had steak money, but you had to use your whole stamp or whatever, right? If you wanted to get something good in terms of cuts of meat, you had to get really good cuts of meat. Were very limited, right? Or you could get ground beef and those were fewer points per pound, or you could get organ meat, and that was even fewer points per pound. So you had a choice of how to use that. And each person got to buy a certain number of points each week of meat. Now, what that meant was 2 things. One, people started changing the way that they socialized and ate, right? Some of these food culture things, like potlucks, have always been in lower socioeconomic status, but they started hitting the upper socioeconomic status, or at least the middle class at this point. So you started seeing potlucks more. You started seeing barbecues where it was the family hosting would have all the fixings, but people would bring the meat that they were going to put on the grill themselves, because there's no way a family could just splurge and buy everybody's steaks or even their hamburgers or hot dogs. You also saw the U.S. government begin trying to figure out how to convince people to eat the variety organ meats and lower meats. So they actually brought in Margaret Mead and Kurt Lewin, which Margaret Mead's like anthropology, groundbreaking. And Kurt Lewin is like the grandfather of social psychology. They brought them in to work on a committee to try to figure out how to spin organ meat and teach people how to use it and all of that. They did some really interesting stuff. There's incredible recipes out there on like how to cook hearts that were Margaret Mead and Kurt Lewin doing their war effort, trying to teach people how to use the meat that we had, because we needed to send the rest of the meat over to both U.S. soldiers and other countries that had higher food scarcity. So yeah, that was what was crossing my mind today while I was getting chorizo, and now I hope it crosses yours as you're eating whatever meat you eat today, or if you don't eat meat, considering how many points you're saving